So recently I was having a conversation with my sister and she stopped and asked me how I read so many books. Now most of my family know that I'm a huge reader, but no one has actually ever stopped me to ask me exactly how I read so many books until the other day. And this got me thinking, because I've never really sat down and analysed how I got into reading so much. However, when I sat down and pondered over this question that I was asked, I actually realised that there is a method to the madness, and I shared that method with my sister because she wanted to become more of a reader and read more books. Now since I've shared this system with my sister, she's actually burned through 5 books, which I think is pretty neat, because prior to this conversation that we had, she actually considered herself to being someone who hates reading. Now I'm a reader, there is no doubt about that. I love reading, I love the thought of reading, I love the thought of books, I love physical books, I love Kindle books, I love everything about reading. And I love reading so much that it's a habit that I actively pursue every single day, not only for myself, but even for my daughter. She's in such a good habit of reading every night that she cannot go to sleep without reading a book. So without further ado, let's dive straight into the I.C.T method that will help you read more books. So the I in the I.C.T method stands for identity. Any habit that you're looking to change requires a fundamental shift in identity. And this applies to any habit, not just the habit of reading. In the book Psychocybernetics, Dr. Maltz talks about identity as the self-image, but they're both essentially the same thing. In the book, he states that the self-image or identity is a premise, a base or a foundation upon which your entire personality, your behavior, or even your circumstances are built. Therefore, all your actions, feelings, behaviors, even your abilities are always consistent with your self-image. Now, my sister has always identified as someone who hates reading. Whenever I've mentioned a book or something that she can read, depending on her circumstances, she's always told me that, oh, I can't do that, I'm not a reader, I don't read books. And she's always told me that she finds reading boring and time-consuming, and she would rather watch a video than read a book. So if we analyze the statements made by my sister, then we can see that she clearly does not identify as someone who is a reader. Because she didn't have the identity or underlying belief that she's a reader, she didn't take the actions or the behaviors that a reader would do, i.e. read. So in Atomic Habits, James Clear talks about the 3 layers of behavior change. Now, behavior change is like an onion. It includes a change in identity, a change in your processes, and a change in your outcomes. Identity is about what you fundamentally believe about yourself, the processes are about what you do or the actions that you take, and the outcomes are about what you get as a result. Now we can clearly see from this diagram that to affect our outcomes, we must first change our identity. And so to become a reader, we must first instill the identity of a reader. This will then lead to the actions that align with the identity, and eventually we will get the outcome attached to that identity. It's very hard to maintain actions that do not align with your identity. If you still identify as someone who doesn't like reading and thinks that reading is a chore, then it's very unlikely that you will go out of your way to take actions that are incongruent with this particular identity. And so to create a habit of reading, it's first important that you identify as a reader or someone who enjoys reading. True behavior change is identity change. When your behavior and your identity are fully aligned, you are no longer pursuing behavior change. You are in fact simply acting like the person you already believe yourself to be. So what if you identify as someone who doesn't like reading? What can you do to change your self-image or your identity? So there are 2 steps to changing your identity. Number 1 is deciding the type of person you want to be, and number 2 is proving it to yourself with small wins. So how this works for reading books is that you would first decide that you want to become a reader. That's the first step. But then secondly, you would decide on a particular number of books that you want to read per month. And then you simply start to read. Every time you read a paragraph or a page, that casts a vote towards the identity of a reader. As you read more and more, you read more paragraphs, you read more chapters, this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy and you start to believe that you are a reader. And therefore you read even more, eventually creating a habit of reading every single day. In the book Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins, he states that we will all act consistently with our views of who we truly are, whether that view is accurate or not. The reason is that one of the strongest forces in the human organism is the need for consistency. This is known as the Galatea effect, where our own opinions about our ability and our self-worth affect our performance. The more we believe that we can do something, the more likely we'll be able to do it. So why not use the Galatea effect to your advantage by creating a feedback loop that slowly transitions you into becoming a reader? So let's move on to the C in the I.C.T system, which is creating a system. So now that you've set a goal to become a reader and read a certain number of books per year, and you've started proving to yourself that you can get through a book without falling asleep or pulling your hair out. So then what you need to do is to create a system that you can follow every single day to create the habit of reading. Now, I've spoken about this many times before, that goals without a system are pretty useless. So there's not really any point setting up a goal of reading 52 books per year if it's not backed up by a system that allows you to identify the steps, exactly what you need to do every single day. So that is exactly what we're going to do in this particular step, is we're going to create a system that will allow you to become a reader. But before we go into that, what is the difference between a system and a goal? In Atomic Habits, James Clear explains the difference between a habit and a goal. And he states that goals are about the results you want to achieve. Systems are about the processes that lead to those results. If you want better results, then forget about setting goals. Focus on your system instead. Goals are good for setting a direction, but systems are best for making progress. So with this process in mind, we first need to identify our goal. How many books do you want to read in the year? Let's say you're just starting off, and so you don't want to be too ambitious or too out there, and you stick to 25 books per year. Now that is still a very decent number of books to read per year, especially if you're someone who has never read before or doesn't really like reading. And that's the key point here. The last thing you want to do is to create a goal so overwhelming and so scary that instead of motivating you, it scares you into inaction. Then you need to work backwards and break that goal down even further and create a system that you can follow along with. This will allow you to pull that yearly goal into the present. So let's say the average book has 200 pages. If you times that by 25 books, that gives you 5,000 pages. Now, if we divide that by 52 for the number of pages per week, we will get around 96 pages per week. We can then divide 96 by 6 to give us 16. So this is the number of pages you need to focus on reading per day. This then forms your system, and so every day all you need to focus on is to read those 16 pages of your book. And you'll know that so long as you follow along with that system, then you will have read 25 books by the end of the year. So you can see from this example that you can even take one day off for emergencies or stuff like that. Now, it's important to bear in mind that some books may be longer and some books may be shorter, and also on some days you might even get into the flow and read more than the 16 pages. The point is to identify the minimum effort required so that you know that you shouldn't fall below that. Now, I know some of you may have even laughed at reading 16 pages a day because that's just not something that you do right now, and you might be thinking, well, I'm too slow, I can't do that. But bear in mind that you don't always have to read a physical book. You can listen to it on Audible if you want to. Or even have a Kindle version which you can read in your spare time when you're commuting or in the bus or in the train. You can even take steps to improve your reading speed. There's loads of different courses out there that help you speed up your reading, so you can always do that as well. The second thing to understand is that any habit worth creating takes time, and so no one's going to expect you to start reading 16 pages from the get-go. You can work your way up to it. It doesn't really matter. The whole point is that you slowly and incrementally improve so that you can slowly become a reader. So you have full freedom to start from one page a day and then slowly move your way up. So referring to my first point, that even reading one page a day casts a vote for the identity of a reader, of someone who reads every single day, even if that's one page. The consistency is more important than the intensity. So let's move on to the T in the ICT system, which is to create tabs. Now this is more of a concept rather than actual tabs, but you can create actual tabs as well if you want to. The whole premise behind this step is to create some sort of visual representation of your system, primarily so that it becomes a no-brainer and you don't have to put any physical effort into remembering your system that you've created. You need to make it extremely clear so that you know exactly what you need to do every day. You can do this in the form of physical tabs, so you can put in post-it notes every 16 pages so that every time you get to a post-it note, you know that you've done your daily task or your daily system. And then you don't have to remember where you read from and where you read to. You just have these post-it notes that are showing you exactly what you've read, where you've stopped, and where you need to carry on from. We need to make the implementation of the system that you've created a no-brainer. And so the less brain power you need to use, the less effort you need to put into remembering what the system is, the easier it's going to be for you to implement the system. Because this reduces the friction, and that's exactly what you want at the beginning stages of forming a habit. The less decision or choices you have to make, the easier that decision becomes. And so that's really important when you're first starting a habit. You can take this concept of tabs even further by putting post-it notes on each one of your books and putting a number on them as to the order that you're going to read them in. So it's totally a no-brainer for you as to which book you're reading, then the next one, then the next one, and then the next one. So basically everything that you're doing at this point of the I.C.T method is to reduce the friction in following through with the system that you've created. If you're using a Kindle device, then you can use this tab system to write down the range of pages that you need to read. So just get a little notepad or a book or your journal and just write down the range of pages that you need to get through every single day so that you know exactly what pages you need to read to achieve your yearly goal. The cool thing about the Kindle device is that it also gives you reading insights. So it tells you how much you've been reading, what your streak is, and all that kind of stuff. So that can really keep you motivated as well. That is all, folks. That is my ICT system that will help you read more books. If you want to know 4 apps that will help you read more books, then check out this video here that I created for you. That's all for this video. Take care. Bye-bye.